Asexuality is a different kind of fullness. On asexuality, hypersexualization, and the intimacy of silence in a world that demands spectacle, by Lovette Jallow. Asexuality has always existed, even without a name. Before labels, there was already recognition. Before I ever knew the word asexual, I had already lived the experience. See, in many pre-colonial African societies, there were people who were not driven by sexual desire, not out of repression or trauma, but because their energies were directed elsewhere, toward spiritual work, community territory, guardianship, or healing. These were not always women. They were men, women, boys, girls, trans, whose stillness in this area of life was not questioned. It was aligned and assigned purpose. They held roles that required clarity and guidance. Griots, midwives, rainmakers, shrinekeepers, diviners. People whose lives were structured around protection, language, and lineage, rather than sexual or romantic partnership. And still many were violated. Revered and targeted, trusted and transgressed. Because even in societies that make space for them, power and control always lingered nearby. Their stillness wasn't questioned, it was honored. Sacred roles weren't sexualized until power distorted them. Their disinterest in coupling didn't signal a lack, but trustworthiness. In some cultures, these individuals were seen as bridges between worlds, the ones who could be trusted, not only because of their spiritual work, but because their energy wasn't being pulled into nuclear pair bonding. Their lives instead were intertwined with community itself. See, there was space for people like me long before diagnostic frameworks, long before aphobic jokes, long before Western sex-centric norms took over the conversation. What I now call asexuality in the English language was called a different name. Or perhaps they simply recognized what it was without needing a name, a label. Across geographies, I can take you historically to Mesopotamia, Jerusalem, or even Timbuktu, because this pattern repeats. But let's pause in ancient Greece. Someone like Medusa is often misread, but she too was a guardian of a sacred temple, bound to vows of stillness and autonomy. And when she was violated, her refusal became mythologized as monstrosity. She's not alone. We Black Africans have many stories like hers too. Stories of people who refused or simply didn't respond and were punished for it. There are even mentions in the Bible. So no, it is not strange that someone like me doing the work that I do, carrying memory, shaping language, speaking truth, is not moved by sexual desire when my mind and heart remain untouched. It makes sense. It always has. We just didn't have the words for it then. Now we do. The next section is not an explanation, it's a remembering. What asexuality actually means and what it doesn't. I once told someone I loved them after sitting in silence for hours with them. Not needing to speak, no declarations, no butterflies, just stillness. That kind of stillness that rearranges something in you, not because they touched you, but because they didn't need to. I don't fall in love the way movies taught us to. There is no lightning bolt, no hunger, no scripted kiss in the rain. What I feel is gradual and slow, but when it settles, it stays. I fall in love when I feel seen, quietly, fully, without having to translate myself. Which is why I always pause when people ask, so, are you asexual? Because yes, I am, but not in the way most people understand it. What asexuality actually means and what it doesn't. Asexuality is a spectrum, not a sentence. So let's begin with clarity. Asexuality is a sexual orientation, that's it. Not a symptom, not a delay, not a wound. Some asexual people never feel sexual desire. Others do, but only in specific conditions. Some are repulsed by sex. Some are neutral. Some enjoy it. Asexuality isn't about fear, trauma, or waiting to be fixed. It's simply a different rhythm of connection. It refers to people who experience little to no sexual attraction. But how that looks in practice is wide and varied. It doesn't mean we can't love. It doesn't mean we're celibate, though some are. It doesn't mean we're sex averse, though some are. It doesn't mean we're broken, traumatized, or wanting or waiting to be fixed. The asexual spectrum: demisexual, graysexual, agosexual, cupiosexual. And on that spectrum, you will find identities like demisexual, who only experience sexual attraction after deep emotional bonds. Graysexuals, who feel attraction rarely, weakly, or ambiguously. Phrasexuals, who feel attraction that fades once intimacy is established. Cupiosexuals, who don't feel attraction but may still want sexual relationships. Agosexuals or autocrisexuals, who may feel desire but remain disconnected from it. Some are sex favorable, some are sex indifferent, and others sex repulsed. None of these are contradictions. They're simply ways that human intimacy resists standardization and refuses to be forced into scripts built around dominance, pursuit, or consumption. These are reminders that intimacy doesn't need to follow the same script. Asexuality is a different type of fullness, not a lack. Sexual attraction just isn't our default setting. It doesn't structure how we seek connection or determine our sense of intimacy. For many of us on the asexual spectrum, attraction is never assumed, automatic, or even relevant to how we experience closeness. And yet the world reads that difference as deficiency because it doesn't understand it. People often misinterpret asexuality as a void. But for me, and for many like me, it isn't emptiness. It's a different type of fullness. A self-contained clarity that doesn't require external validation or performative desire. I abstain personally, not because I'm guarded, but because there is no emotional alignment, no shared internal rhythm, so my body remains still. There's nothing to withhold because nothing has been awakened. That stillness isn't fear, it's truth. Being asexual isn't a wound, it's just a different type of way of being present in this world. Nothing to be healed from. We just need room to exist without being misread. Because especially when you're a Black woman, especially when you're autistic, especially when your existing already carries layers of misrecognition, to be in a hypersexualized, neurotypical, gendered society is to live under constant suspicion. Some assume repression, others infantilize. Many believe that desire is buried deep and just needs the right trigger, persistence, charm, or touch. But what they're actually doing is erasing us and overstepping boundaries and violating. They deny that we've already named our truth, and they try to rewrite it to fit their own expectations. And when that truth comes from a Black woman, the denial becomes more violent. The world doesn't just misunderstand us, it feels entitled to override us. We are seen through a lens that was shaped by white supremacy, patriarchy, and cultural assumptions about who and what Black women are supposed to be. Neutrality is not afforded to us. Disinterest is not believed. Boundaries are not respected. For many of us, especially those of us who are neurodivergent or femme, being asexual is not simply an internal knowing. It's a refusal to be consumed, a refusal to perform, a refusal to contort our intimacy into scripts shaped by dominance, by urgency, by extraction. So when I say I'm ace, whether demisexual or something else, it's not just a self-description, it's resistance. I'm not confused, I'm not late, I'm not broken, I'm ace. And naming that truth in a world that was trained to desire me before it was ever taught to respect me is a radical act. Which brings us to the next question. What happens when a Black woman says she doesn't want you? The hypersexualization of Black women and the erasure of asexuality. Hypervisibility doesn't equal understanding. To say I'm not attracted to anyone as a Black woman is to rupture a centuries-old script. Our bodies have never been granted neutrality. From colonial caricatures to modern dating apps, Black femininity has always been cast as indulgent, hyper-available and insatiable, rarely sacred, uninterested or autonomous. See, Black women's disinterest disrupts fantasies. So when a Black woman says she's asexual or demisexual or simply uninterested, the reaction isn't curiosity, it's disbelief. Are you sure? Maybe you just haven't met the right person. Maybe it's trauma. Maybe you're afraid of intimacy. Your body language tells me you're interested. Because to the world, our disinterest isn't allowed to be ours. It must be corrected, explained, or undone. The same society that hypersexualizes us also pathologizes our refusal. And when we remove ourselves from that gaze, we're punished socially, romantically, even clinically. The very act of naming our disinterest becomes a form of resistance. For asexual, demisexual Black women, this cost is compounded. We are made invisible in ace spaces where whiteness sets the tone, and pathologized in wider society that cannot accept Black desire as slow, conditional, or absent. But my truth is this: I do fall in love, but it begins in conversation, not chemistry, in shared silence, not spectacle, in intellectual intimacy that softens into emotional safety. By the time I feel desire, it's because I already feel held. And if I don't feel that, I feel nothing at all, because my body doesn't respond to demand. It responds to resonance. When no doesn't sound like no because you're quiet about it. Stillness isn't confusion, it's a boundary. She said, I have enough friends, so dating is what this is. She said, you're impossible to read, you know that. I nodded. Halfway through dinner, I hadn't even defined it. She called it a date. I hadn't. There was no tension in the air, just her curiosity pressing against my quiet. She watched me like I was a riddle she could decode if she just asked the right questions. But I wasn't performing mystery. I was holding clarity. We had a second dinner. I told her plainly I think we'd be better as friends. I already knew we weren't equally yoked, not emotionally, not spiritually, not energetically. I didn't feel resonance. I felt obligation, and my body still. She said she had enough friends, so dating was what it would be. And for the next 18 months, we traveled, sat side by side on long-haul flights, shared hotel rooms and photos and space. But we never touched, not intimately, not even in passing, because there was no desire, no mental mesh, no shared inner world. To her, we were dating. To me, she was just the imam's daughter. Imam meaning religious leader. A companion I had mistakenly let in too close. People think asexuality is about prudishness or trauma or rules. But for me, it's about truth. And the truth was, I felt nothing. Not repulsion, not fear, just nothing. Because my desire doesn't respond to expectation. It responds to safety, resonance, and recognition. If those aren't there, nothing stirs. But what I knew deep down, even if I couldn't name it, was that connection can't be pushed into existence. You don't earn desire through persistence. You don't extract affection through presence alone. And you don't get to bypass someone's no just because it wasn't dramatic. Demisexuality is not just being picky. Demisexuality is part of the asexual spectrum. It means sexual attraction only happens after a strong emotional connection has formed. And that takes time. For me, this isn't some romantic ideal. It's how I'm wired. I don't feel desire on sight. I don't flirt for sport. I don't just know if I'm into someone. My body doesn't respond before my heart does, or my mind. And yet people misread this as avoidance, fear, or trauma response. But demisexuality isn't withholding. It's just a rhythm of connection. The tragedy is that we often get written off before we've even had a chance to connect, because so much of modern dating is built on performance, immediacy, and spectacle, none of which has anything to do with how we love. And when you're also neurodivergent, these layers become even harder to explain. Autistic people, especially those of us with alexithymia, may not even recognize desire as it's happening. It might feel like comfort, it might feel like clarity. It might feel like nothing until suddenly it feels like home. What's important here is consent. I don't flirt, my body doesn't know how. My rhythm isn't mystery, it's clarity. I was 23 when someone told me I flirted like I was delivering a political speech. Not seductive, just direct, earnest, almost bureaucratic. They said it jokingly, I laughed, but inside I felt that familiar confusion. The one that comes when people expect you to play a game you were never taught and scold you for playing differently. I don't flirt, I connect. If my mind hasn't merged with yours in some quiet, layered, non-verbal way, I'm not interested. It's not mystery I seek, it's meaning. And I can't otherwise pretend just to keep up. The loneliness of being misread as demisexual. Not falling fast doesn't mean not falling fully. I've been in rooms where love was expected to look like fireworks and friction, where wanting more time was mistaken for indifference, where needing to feel someone's inner world before touching their body was labeled too much, too intense, or too slow. It's lonely to be seen as lacking because your version of connection doesn't map into the dominant script. It's lonelier still to internalize that misreading. But I've learned through grief, through clarity, through refusal, that my slowness is not a deficit, it's a boundary, a sanctuary, a way of keeping love sacred instead of performative. What love actually feels like for me. When I love, it's recognition before reaction, home before hunger. When I love, it happens like this, not fast but deeply, not loudly but irrevocably. Not for the idea of someone, but for the feeling I get when I'm around their truth. I fall for their language, the one they use when they think no one is watching. I fall for how they treat silence, how they speak of their past, how they flinch, and how they stay. Love for me is slow trust that builds in the marrow. It's inner world recognition. It's shared neurodivergence, not just in diagnosis, but in rhythm, sensory language, emotional pacing. Sometimes it's rare. Often it's wordless. Always it's chosen. What if love didn't have to look a certain way? I'm not here to convince anyone that asexuality is real. I'm here to remind those of us who live it quietly, defensively, defiantly, that we are not alone. Love doesn't have to arrive loud. Desire doesn't have to be instant. Intimacy doesn't have to follow scripts written by someone else's expectations. Some of us fall in love through silence, through consistency, through shared safety that never demands performance. And some of us don't fall at all, not in the ways the world insists we should. That's not a flaw. That's a freedom. The more I unlearn the rules I was never built to follow, the more space I make for the kind of love that's honest, measured, chosen, and rooted in truth. Not urgency, not spectacle, not hunger mistaken for connection. So if you're reading this and you've ever felt out of sync with how the world talks about love, if you've ever asked yourself, why don't I feel what they feel? Or is something wrong with me for needing more? Let this be your answer. No. You're just not broken. You're built for something else. Thank you so much for reading the Lovette Jallow perspective. This post is public. Future ones will be behind for my paid subscribers. Feel free to share it with anyone navigating these complexities and communication differences and sexual differences. Thank you.